Every precious stone you have ever heard of comes from many places at once. Diamonds are pulled out of the ground in more than 30 countries. Rubies, sapphires, emeralds, all of them spread across whole continents, mined on land that sits thousands of miles apart. But there is one gemstone on this planet that breaks that rule completely. It comes from a single patch of ground in northern Tanzania, an area smaller than a large airport, and nowhere else. Not one confirmed crystal has ever been dug up anywhere else on the entire surface of the Earth. For a long time, people just called that luck. It wasn't luck. It was a chemical accident that, by almost every rule of geology, should never have happened in the first place. This is the story of how the Earth built a gem in one spot and then threw away the instructions. It comes in 3 parts: the impossible chemistry that made it, the single scar of ground where all of it hides, and the clock that says the planet will never make it again. Start with the stone itself. Tanzanite is a deep blue that leans toward violet, the color of a sky in the last few minutes before it goes fully dark. Underneath that color, it is not a very exotic mineral at all. It is a variety of something called zoisite, a fairly common calcium and aluminium silicate that turns up in grey and brown lumps in Austria, in Norway, and in parts of the United States. Ordinary zoisite is nobody's idea of treasure. What separates Tanzanite from all of that plain grey rock is a trace of one metal woven into its structure: vanadium. That single ingredient is where the trouble begins. Because in the chemistry of the Earth's crust, aluminium and vanadium do not like to travel together. Where you find a lot of aluminium, you usually find very little vanadium, and the reverse. They tend to concentrate in completely different kinds of rock, under completely different conditions. Tanzanite needs a crystal that is rich in aluminium, and it needs that crystal seeded with just enough vanadium to catch the light and turn blue. On paper, those two demands cancel each other out. So the real question is not why Tanzanite is rare. The question is how it managed to exist at all. The answer starts on the floor of an ocean that no longer has a name. Around 700 million years ago, this part of Africa was underwater, the bed of a vanished sea geologists call the Mozambique Ocean. On that seabed, layer after layer of dark, oxygen-starved mud built up, thick with the remains of dead sea life. Organic mud like that has a strange talent. As it sits there rotting in still, airless water, it acts like a sponge for certain metals. Slowly, quietly, over enormous spans of time, that black sludge pulled vanadium out of the seawater and locked it away inside itself. It concentrated the exact ingredient that ordinary aluminium rock could never hold on its own. Then the planet buried it. Continents began to close in on each other as the supercontinent Gondwana came together, and that ancient seabed was dragged down and crushed deep underground, cooked at temperatures well over 600 degrees Celsius. The soft black mud turned to hard metamorphic rock. And here is the fingerprint that proves the whole story. The rock that holds Tanzanite is threaded with graphite, pure carbon, and the chemistry of that carbon shows it came from living things. That graphite is the ghost of the ancient ooze. It is the reason the vanadium was there in the first place. That same graphite did one more critical job. It kept the whole system starved of oxygen, chemically reducing, and that mattered enormously for the color. Vanadium can sit in slightly different states depending on how much oxygen is around, and only one of those states gives you that clean blue-violet. The buried carbon held the vanadium in exactly the right condition. Change the oxygen even a little, and the miracle stone comes out a muddy, worthless brown. So now the vanadium and the aluminium were finally in the same rock. But that still was not enough. The gem needed somewhere to actually grow, and it needed the temperature to be dropping at just the right speed. As the mountains rose and then slowly began to cool, the crushed rock layers were stretched and folded like putty. Hard bands inside softer rock snapped into sausage-shaped chunks, structures geologists call Boudins, and the rock buckled into tight folds. In the gaps and the fold hinges, in the low-pressure pockets where the stone had pulled apart, hot fluids collected. And it was there, on the way down from the peak of the heat, not at the top of it, that the vanadium-rich fluids finally crystallized into blue zoisite. This happened somewhere between 585 and 600 million years ago during the mountain-building event that welded Eastern Africa together. Line it all up and you see why there is only one place. You needed an ancient organic seabed to gather the vanadium. You needed it buried and cooked to exactly the right depth. You needed graphite present to hold the oxygen down and protect the color. You needed the folding and the Boudins traps to give the crystals room to grow. And you needed the temperature falling through one narrow window at the right moment. Miss any single one of those steps, and you get grey rock. All of them happened together in one strip of Tanzania. The mining companies that sell the stone like to say it is 1,000 times rarer than a diamond, and geologists are careful not to put a hard number on odds like that. But on the science alone, this was close to a one-time event. Which brings us to the ground itself. The place is called the Merelani Hills, a low, dusty rise in the Manyara region of northern Tanzania, sitting in the shadow of Mount Kilimanjaro, not far from the town of Arusha. The productive band is tiny. Most estimates put it at roughly 7 kilometers long and around 2 kilometers wide, a sliver of dry African scrubland you could walk across in an afternoon. Everything the world has ever seen of this gem, every ring, every pendant, every auction stone, came out of that one narrow seam, and the world only found out about it by accident in 1967. A prospector named Manuel de Souza was hunting for gemstones near Kilimanjaro when local Maasai showed him strange, glassy blue crystals lying on the surface. De Souza thought he had struck sapphire at first, then realized the stones were far too soft. Credit for the actual find is usually given to a Maasai man named Ali Juyawatu, whose name still marks the main gem-bearing rock at the site. There is an older story the Maasai tell about that ground. They say lightning struck the dry grass, a fire swept across the hills, and the plain brown pebbles scattered on the surface were transformed by the heat into glowing blue jewels. It is a beautiful legend, and geologists will tell you a grass fire could never get anywhere near hot enough to do it. But here is the strange part. The legend is pointing at something real, because the deep secret of Tanzanite is that almost every blue stone you have ever seen was, in fact, changed by heat. Straight out of the ground, most Tanzanite is not blue. It is a dull brownish or reddish crystal that looks like nothing special. Jewelers heat it, usually to somewhere around 400 to 600 degrees Celsius, and that gentle baking shifts the state of the vanadium inside and unlocks the blue-violet color for good. The Maasai imagined fire from the sky turning brown stones blue. The entire modern industry does exactly that, on purpose, in an oven. The myth was wrong about the mechanism and right about the magic. There is one more trick hidden in the crystal. Tanzanite is strongly trichroic, which means it shows 3 different colors depending on the angle you look through it. Turn a single rough stone in your hand and it flashes deep blue, then violet, then a burgundy red. It is the same gem, showing you 3 faces of itself because of the way its structure bends light along its different axes. Cutters have to choose which color to chase when they shape the stone. For all of that, the gem nearly went to market with a name almost no one would have wanted. When it reached New York, the mineral was simply blue zoisite. In 1968, the jeweler Tiffany and Company decided to promote it, and someone there decided that zoisite sounded far too close to the word suicide to sell a luxury stone, so they renamed it after the only country on Earth that had it, Tanzanite. Tiffany told the world it could be found in just 2 places, Tanzania and Tiffany. If you are finding this as strange and as satisfying as I do, take a second to subscribe, because this channel digs into the hidden geology behind the treasures the Earth only made once. Now, to the part of the story that gives it an ending, because this gem is running out. And unlike almost anything else we pull from the ground, when this deposit is gone, there is no second location waiting to be discovered. The Earth is not making more of it. Traders gave it a nickname that is equal parts sales pitch and simple truth. They call it a one-generation gemstone. Most industry estimates give the deposit somewhere between 20 and 30 years of life at current mining rates, and every one of those numbers comes from the people who mine and sell it, so treat them as rough. What is not in doubt is the direction. The easy surface stones are long gone. Today the main mines chase the seam down through hard rock past 800 meters, which makes them some of the deepest colored gemstone mines anywhere on the planet. And the deeper it goes, the harder and more dangerous every carat becomes. Every so often, that gamble pays off spectacularly. In 2020, an artisanal miner named Saniniu Liza pulled two enormous rough crystals out of the Merelani ground, together weighing over 14 kilograms. The Tanzanian government paid him around $3.33 million for them, and overnight, a small-scale digger became a millionaire. Stones that size are almost unheard of, and as the deposit ages, they will only get rarer. That value, packed into so small a place, has made this ground one of the most fought-over patches of soil in Africa. So much Tanzanite was being smuggled out through Kenya, cut cheaply in India, and sold on with Tanzania seeing only a sliver of the money, that in 2017 the government took an extraordinary step. It built a wall, a perimeter barrier around 24 kilometers long, ringing the entire mining zone with cameras and checkpoints built by the military and finished in a matter of months. A wall around a gem field to keep a national treasure from leaking out one pocket at a time. And once, this quiet blue stone was even accused of funding terrorism. In November 2001, just weeks after the September 11th attacks, a front-page article in the Wall Street Journal claimed that Tanzanite smuggling was helping to finance Al-Qaeda. The effect was immediate. Major retailers, Tiffany, QVC, Zale, pulled Tanzanite from their shelves, and the market for the stone collapsed by around 70% almost overnight. Then, a few months later, the United States State Department investigated and stated plainly that it had found no evidence any terror group was funding itself through Tanzanite. The panic had been built on very little. Slowly, quietly, the blue stone came back to the display cases. Which is the strange place this all ends. In 2002, Tanzanite was made an official birthstone for the month of December, the first new birthstone the trade had added in about 90 years. Think about what that means. We took a gem that exists in one vanishing strip of African ground, a stone the earth assembled once through a chain of accidents it is unlikely to ever repeat, and we tied it to a month on the calendar, to birthdays that come around every single year, a permanent symbol resting on one of the least permanent sources of treasure on the planet. Somewhere under Kilimanjaro, miners are still going down through the dark, chasing a seam of blue that the earth laid down before there were animals with backbones, in a place it chose exactly once. When it runs out, that will be the end of it. Not rare, finished. If you want to see the same kind of geological accident behind another treasure, the one place on Earth that holds most of the world's platinum locked in a 2 billion-year-old scar, that video is on screen now.